So as per the yesterday view, this is the whole plan we explained. Then let us try to configure the local git and as well as the remote git. Remote in the sense there are two ways. Either we already created repository at the Bitbucket, right? So create the Bitbucket repository, or you can also create a repository in the GitHub also. That's why these three repositories we already touched in AWS. We touched the code commit successfully, and GitHub, even you can create a repository in the GitHub also. So Bitbucket or GitHub. Go to github.com if you want, sign in, as well as even if you don't have account, click on account and just create a repository. Yes, let me check my verification code. So how we create the repository in the Bitbucket? The same way here too, you can create a repository. So creating a repository is your responsibility. So open this one. Yeah, go to here. I think so there are some spaces. Very fine. Yeah, so this is GitHub. The same way how you create the repository here too. Just click on Neo and you will create Cicd pipeline. You can create and you can make it the repository as a public or private. So if you want to create the private, just click on private and just create repository. So once you create the repository, you can connect to this repository using HTTPS or SSH. So secure shell or HTTPS. So this is the repository URL. HTTPS. If you observe, see yesterday, I think so. Okay, so let me. This is the GitHub repo. Okay, the same time, if you go to the Bitbucket, just yeah, this is the Bitbucket. And how to create the repositories. Yesterday we created one repository, isn't it? If you go and click on repositories, you can see last day we created one repository. Just click here And as usual, we have commits, the branches, pull requests, pipelines. See, nowadays, every modern distributed version controlling provides a CI/CD. That's why I said in the last very clearly, don't run with all technologies, all techniques. So here you can design a pipeline inside the Bitbucket, as well as even if you go to the um, GitHub. See, there is an actions. Inside the actions, you can define your own workflow. This is called GitHub Actions. You can deploy your code with the Power services, Azure Web App, or ACK, or deploy to ECS, Elastic Container Services, deploy to the IBM Cloud, even OpenShift from the Red Hat. So even Terraform, even see continuous integration tools. So even automate every step process. So looking at, that's why yesterday I said, through GitLab, GitHub Actions, or Bitbucket pipelines, That's why there are 15 views, 15 techniques are there to deploy applications. So that's why don't try to run with always. Otherwise, if you go, you never come back. Go on step by step. So now the procedure is, now you must know how to create the repository in the GitHub as well as Bitbucket or code commit. So that's why we already demonstrated these three things: GitHub, Bitbucket, and code commit. If you have a free time, you just go and learn Azure repo as well as SVN repository. So I think so GitHub, maximum 80 to 90% of the companies use a GitHub. It's not mandatory to save only Git. It's a matter of few minutes. If you know one tool, within fraction of minutes, you can easily switch over to the repositories. If you are unable to, in the sense, I'm helpless. So now, if we go to GitHub, sorry, where it is here. This is the Bitbucket, right? So even if you're looking at clone, so you can clone your repositories, you can download your repositories, you can share your repositories. Okay, so if you go and see the pipelines, see, you build the test, deploy with the pipelines. You can easily set up your integrated Bitbucket cloud that helps to automate your code from test to production environment. So of course they're asking to a verification to enable it. It's not a big deal. You just go to source. Right now we are added the Spring Pipelining project at which branch, a master branch. Even you can create a number of branches. Okay, if you go here, if you go and see the clone, see, you can copy either HTTPS as well as SSH based. So if you copy, you just go and see the difference. So that's, nothing is different. So you can create repository at the code commit. Even you just go to the AWS, go to code commit. This is also we discussed, right? Code commit. Now, just this is the project. I think we already demonstrated successfully in the 2 weeks back. So we created repositories. So that's why depends on your project requirement, whether you can use a cloud repository or you can use either a GitHub repository or Bitbucket repository. Even if you are sound, go to GitLab. So this is also a one-way too. So again, you can create one more account at your GitLab. You can practice it. So in the GitLab, you can configure every tools. So that's why be clear and don't try to run with all views. Right? If you have freedom, you need to practice. Okay. Even you just go to the SVN. So SVN, tortoise svn.net. So you need to go and download it and try to configure. This is not a distributor. This is called a central version controlling system. So that's why here one thing you need to understand when you are working with the CI/CD pipeline. Are you trying to use centralized version controlling system (CVS), centralized version controlling system, or distributed version controlling system? So here distributed controlling system, you can say Git. And centralized version controlling system, SVN, subversion. SVN stands for subversion. So here in the last sessions I explained it. Whenever your release manager plan the release calendar, in that once the release was planned, if it is a major release or minor release or hotfix release, accordingly you will receive the email alerts. If you are in a small company, if you are in big scale company, they follow the ITL management through Jira. They will assign a task as a user story, or they will assign as a ticket to you, so that once you receive the email from your lead, then go and see the tickets, or go and see the task and identify and read the description and accordingly create a repository. That's why creating a repository is your job. So not only creating repositories, you can manage your repositories, you can lock your repositories, you can unlock your repositories, you will resolve the conflicts at repositories. That's why repository maintenance, repository administration, configuring the webhooks, restricting the users, okay, and freezing the code, okay, then creating the multiple branches, merging the branches, okay, and defining the proper tags and administration activities. That is your responsibilities. That's why you must be clear idea about the GitHub. Local Git, anyhow, you don't want to talk about too many commands. Normally, if you speak technically, you must be strong on the repository side, because we're integrating GitHub now. So I have a repository. Now, if you go to the, suppose, if I go to my username here, these are the list of my repositories. There are totally 7 repositories. If you click on repositories, so this is, and you can create a new one. This is public, right? Just go and looking at the private repositories. I think so. We already created a private repositories, isn't it? Suppose private repositories. Just now, 10 minutes back, I created. Just go to the CI/CD pipeline. So this is, so once the repository was created, what is the next step? You must have some code. Right now, there is no code. So why we need a code? Yes, absolutely. Without code, can you generate the package? Because as per process, the local developer should sit in their server, it is EC2 instance or a virtual machine in on-premises. Then you need to send, you need to push your code. Like, who are pushing the code? Developers. That's why developing the code, performing debugging, and conducting the unit test. Once they feel good, they will share the source code into the repository. Once the unit test is done, a senior developer or who are responsible developer need to be integrated he will try to integrate. While integrating, he maybe raise the pull request to the DevOps engineer, and you must perform the pull request while calling the pull request. If any merge issues are resolved, you try to closely sit with your development team and try to resolve the pull request and issues, pull request issues or merging issues. Then they will finally they finally maintain the proper repository, proper code at the repositories. Once the code is properly available at your branch, it may be a master branch, it may be a release branch, it may be a hotfix branch, it may be any branches. Then you need to create a CA job for every branch once it is designed. So, so for that you need a repository. We need a code actually. So got it. So now, if you are beginner, so you need to understand a few minutes about the local repository, or you can say Git architecture, how the Git architecture works out. So because some of people already completed the GitHub and Git, and you guys, remaining guys, you don't know, but just understand, I don't take too much time. I will explain what is the repository and how to create the repositories. Generally, the main purpose of Git is, sorry, just give a second. Sorry, guys. So you need to understand the local Git repository. So here there are two kinds of repositories: local repositories and remote repositories. Local and remote repositories. So the main purpose of Git is we are trying to track the changes, identifying the changes, who modified, who built, and historical data. You can maintain it with the different timestamps, and this is just like automatic file systems, and it keep track of every change made by the developer to the repositories. And every repository, every developer machine maintain their own local repositories. There's many advantages. The Git is working on the Git disconnected architecture. You don't need to wait for the other repositories. You can have a complete snapshot of your repository. You can keep it in your local machine and you can work on it. And later you can push to the GitHub repositories. It's a complete opposite to the S1 repositories. S1 is going to working on the connected architecture. So everything you need to commit and everything you need to pull, everything you need to push it on trunk-based directories with the with your live connection, with your network connection. So if network connection goes down, if sometimes if your administrator or DevOps engineer log the repositories at the S1 repositories, boom, you can't, you can't. So that's why a local repository, sorry, either you can use S1 repository or maybe this one, which one? Central repositories. Distributed and centralized version controlling. So that part we already dealt, we already discussed, but for some of the guys we'll discuss very slowly with what is the local repositories and what is the staging environment and what is the local repositories, how can you push the repositories. So the developer never create the local repositories. Again, remember it. Generally, once you create the local repositories, so once you create the shared repository, for example, this is the repository you created at your GitHub. You just go to your clone, you just go to the, right now I'm in EC2-user. I'm creating one directory, your test repo. Test. Right now, see, there is none. So again, I'm repeating the fundamental point. See, in in our objective of this entire demonstration, we just focus on how the tools are integrated and how to define the Groovy scripting. Don't focus on each and every individual tool, because you are learning all the tools. Some of the people already finished the 90%, they are in the ending part, and some of the already we complete the entire cloud, and we are into the Linux. So how works, forget about. Just focus on the CI/CD process. So for this, there are some minimal steps you need to understand. So we need a repository, the central file system, or distributed version controlling system. We are using distributed version controlling system as a GitHub. So if you want to work with the GitHub or Bitbucket or any other things, if you want to push it, if you want to pull it, you need to have a synchronization file between the local repository and remote repository. The synchronization is nothing but what? Git tracks all your changes within the .git directory only. If there is no .git directory in your local machine, even in future, if you define your build environment, sorry, it won't. So that's why developer responsibilities, they simply clone the repository. You don't want to create their own repositories, because that's our responsibilities. So to get it, you use a command called as a git clone. Git clone. Even you can also use git init. So if you want to create the local repository, you can use a git init. The same repository you can host it to the GitHub repositories. So clone is nothing but cloning a repository. Okay, sorry. Right? Git. So it is asking the username, because I'd say it's a private repository, isn't it? Yeah, you appear to have a clone empty repository. Yes, ls-la. See, right now I got the project Cicd-Pipeline, ls-la .git repository. So in this .git repositories, you have to push your files to the remote repositories. So each and every developer starts working on the local repository. Like there are 5 developers working on 5 local repositories. So every time they clone it, they build it, they will test it, they will check it, and again they will push to the remote repositories. So this is one way. Okay, so here now I have a code. So I need a one project. The project is either Java code or .NET code or anything. You need to push this pipeline. You need to push your code to the central repository, like distributed version controlling repository. So that code is I already demonstrated in the AWS pipeline. We explain a small Spring microservice REST applications to deploy into the Tomcat, like this REST applications, or you can deploy the web application like Pack Clinic. So in the shell scripting, I explain the how to deploy the web application through shell script functions. So take the code here. I just do one thing. I go to my local repository. Here I can share I can share my code to you. There are two types of codes I can share to you. One is e-commerce code and pet clinic code, and try to makes your hand dirty so that you will understand how it works on. Okay. And this is my code actually. In this local machine, I have a code. And if you want to copy the Windows machine to the Linux, for example, there's a whole set of files and folders are there, which is essence to us, which is required to push your code to the remote repository. So right now I'm in the Linux Cicd instance, but my source code file is on Windows machine. In order to copy the Windows machine to the Linux machine, like Cicd instance machine, you can work with either WinSCP tool. So that part I'm not saying, like if you have later part we'll discuss. Even FTP, file transfer protocol, SFTP. Even there is other tools are there to copy your files. This is also one common tool you need to learn it. Whether if I really forget about, I will try to explain later. I think so. We explain the PuTTY and PuTTYGen, right? PuTTY and PuTTYGen. Then MobileStream. These are the connectivity tools we explain, but we never transfer the file from Windows to Linux instance. For this, you need to install your WinSCP. WinSCP is one kind of you need to select your SCP or FTP, then you need to define your host name of your EC2 instances and username and passwords. For example, what kind of protocol you are using, Vijay? Either FTP or SCP. Suppose, as per your experience.
I'm using FTP.
Okay, tell me, as per our requirement, right now I have a folder in my Windows machine, isn't it? This is my Spring Pet Clinic master, and I want to connect into this EC2 instance. I have EC2 credentials, like of course EC2-user is the username, even host name we have public DNS, and there is no password for that, but port is 22. Now tell me which one I need to select, either FTP or SCP. Suppose if I select the FTP, it's FTP. What's your host name? The host name is, if you just go and
This is a server name.
yeah, so you just go to the go to my EC2. Go to the running instance. So this is our CSCD with your host name is either public DNS or maybe public IP. You go and try to, this is, the username is EC2-user, but there is no password. And just click on login. If I say, again, it's dealing issues. Yeah, so it's connection issues. It's not a big deal. Let me go and cross verify it. Suppose if you go with the SCP, the host name is, say, suppose like port is 22, EC2-user is mine, and there is no password for that. You just click on login. That's why I asked you questions, Vijay. Source copy and FTP. Suppose if you click on S, say connecting to user, here obviously what happens, the username is used, but authentication is failed. Authentication is nothing but what? Passwords. So passwords. So that's why we will definitely expand this process, because most of the who are in the Linux environment, who are in the DevOps environment, with SCP, FTP, SCP, you should know it actually. So if you don't know why it is authentication is failed, because there is no authentication mechanism, because you are securely connecting from the Windows server to the Windows to the Linux under different IP addresses. Then you have to follow some SSH key option, SSH key generating. Then we have to generate the public key and we have to securely encrypt it and we have to send it. So that part we'll see. That's why when I go with the step by step, there are some interdependency concepts may touch you. So don't look in it now. You just focus on the high level agenda of how the CI/CD process works out. Okay. So, but now question comes into the picture. So how can you make a file, Srinivas? Then how can you transfer the file from your Windows to Linux? Then not Windows to Linux. Our target is I have to export my code from the Windows machine to the GitHub, which is having public private repositories, isn't it? So for that, you do one thing. You go to the CMD, or go to git bash. I just already explained the git bash. Git bash is a one more command line tool which acts like a git, like Linux. Who wants to feel a CLI that works like a Linux, you try to install. Now I want to push these files to the GitHub. How can I? Suppose if I say ls-la, so there is no .git repositories. But if I blindly say git push -u horizon master, it's saying like, sorry, there is no .git repositories. It means what? Actually, if you're looking at right now, this is my present working directory is a home EC2-user test repo and CI/CD pipeline. This is in this EC2 instance, I don't have a file, but our target is wants to push the code from the GitHub, but there is no code here. As a local developer, you have to build it and you have to commit here, then we have to push it, right? Now see, what I do is, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to see, I'm going to create a directory here only, mkdir repo, the cd repo. Okay. Now see, here git init, you can create git init my repo. You can initialize that .git repository here. As a local developer, he initialize the repository. He create the repositories. ls-la. See, there is cd repo. Cd I repo. So right now it's saying master. If I say ls-la, there is a .git repository. What I'm trying to say, in local repository, I created my own local repository. Here too, but if you go to the EC2 instance machine, ls-la, here also we got the .git. When you get the .git repository, we are cloning the code from the repository. We are cloning this repository. Whenever you clone, automatically dump the entire code from the GitHub as well as it creates a local .git repository. So that's why there are some commands you need to observe very carefully. Right now, don't looking into the dive, just understand high level process. Okay, got my point? So that's what I'm doing is, I go to rm-rf repo rm-rf repo. These are the files, but I want to push these projects to my GitHub. That what can I do? I do one thing. I'm trying to take the clone. I'm trying to take the clone repository. Go to the git bash. So there is a command called as a git clone. Wherever my project directory files are saved, I go to the directory. In order to push and in order to pull, there is one .git directory should be synchronized. That's instead of creating the .git repository local manually, I perform the git clone. The git clone downloads the code from the repository if there is a code. Otherwise, it creates the local repository. So that .git local repository as well as the .git remote repository must be synchronized. So that branches wise, if it is synchronized, then on. It is saying like what? Sign in, okay? Because it's a private repository, isn't it? It is asking the repository credentials. Now see, now ls-la, see there is a CI/CD pipeline directory came, isn't it? The CI/CD pipeline directory came, CD, CI, CD pipeline. Now see, right now I'm in the master branch, but right now there is no code, but .git is there. So if there is a .git, it automatically traces out. Now what I do is, I just copy all the files except this one. One second. Okay, copy. I go to CI/CD pipeline and I paste my entire code. Okay, now see, go back to the pet clinic. Then I do one thing, except I'm trying to delete all files. Okay, now inside the CI/CD pipeline, I have a project code. Now you just go to our local machine, ls-la. These are the files, isn't it? But Git won't directly track it. If you want to see whether Git is properly checking the status or not, just go and fire the git command, git status. It is saying like, hey, some files are untracked. I want to try to add it. That's why again, who already complete the GitHub, they know what the command is doing. Who are not, I think so, some other batch students, I'm unable to, I didn't start the Git. So you may get confused, don't worry about it. Git has its own architecture. So first you need to create the working copy, then you need to add the file from untracked to the track, then you have to commit the code, then you have to push the code to the remote repository. From there again, you have to pull it, we can fetch it, you can merge it, blah, blah, blah. So why we need and how it works internally, what is a git, .git, internal objects, tracing, that we'll discuss. Now, how to add all files? Git add star. I'm adding all files to my local repository. Now git ls, sorry, git status. So still some of the files are there. Git add star 8. Status. Still these files are not available. Then do one git add dot as well as dot edit as well as dot git ignore as well as trace. Cool. The entire files are added. Now see git status. Yes. Now do one thing. Git commit. Git commit -m spring project files are uploading. Okay, I just committed. Now see git status. See, right now you are in the branch master. See, now if you want to push it, see right now there is a branch files in the local repository, but if you go to the central repository like where it is in the, this is GitHub. Right now in this CI/CD pipeline project there is no files, right? Let us go and push it, see. So once you commit the files, let us try to connect from the local repository to the remote repository. The first step is, once you add the file in the local repository, once you feel it, your working tree is clean, then you need to push it. For that, you need to add it actually, because you don't need to add again, because already we connected to the GitHub repository. How can you say git clone, isn't it? First we perform the git clone. When it git clone, automatically it asks the username and password. So our repository is already connected to the remote repository. How can I say git remote-v? See, it is already connected. It's already connected to the repository. Then you do one thing. You let us try to perform the push, git push -u horizon command. See, this is git push -u horizon master, because master is our branch name. See, right now the branch master set up to track the remote branch master from horizon. It means local master branch to remote master branch, both branches are syncing. Go and refresh it. Now see, our code is ready, isn't it? So our GitHub repository contains the code. Now the first step is done successfully. So now come to the cloud. This is, now if we go plus, yeah, even I do one thing, rm -rf removing. Even you just go to cd directory. Right now I'm in the home -user, but if I go and see, I have two repositories. One is a Spring Pipelining as well as a test repo. I do one thing, rm -rf plus. This is the, yesterday we created the repository, isn't it? Yesterday we created the repository and we download the repository from which brand, which one? Bitbucket. So that's why I'm just giving differentiation. Now rm -rf, just clean. Now create a make directory as the Spring repo. I'm just creating cd Spring rep. Now in this working directory, I have no files, but this time I want to get the complete code if you want. just go and git clone your repository URL. I'm asking this free repository, guys. That's what it is asking. That's right. ls cd. Right, my files are ready. Got it. So now I have a repository. Even you can also maintain the same repositories. For example, go to the Bitbucket. I think so, this one, right? Now this is, now clone it, copy this, just go back. Now cd tilde. Bucket repo cd Bitbucket repo. Now git clone. Oh, sorry. Thanks. So. See, it's cloning, right? So it is asking Atlassian login. Showing in two ways. Got it. Now, yeah. So now just go ls-la. Yeah, cd Spring-Pipline project. Right now there is no files, only one. Then do one thing. I go back to my local repository, local machine, and copy these files. Go to the directory. This is Bitbucket. This is Spring-Pipline. Then paste the files. What says that? Now see, go back. This is a local machine, right? Now see, git status. These are the files. Git add dot. It's going to add files. Now ls git status. Right? Git commit -m. Then git status. It is clean. Then git push -u horizontal master.
Sir, spelling mistake and sir. Username spelling mistake, sir.
Right, so the code is ready into the Bitbucket 2. So that's all. So now you just go and refresh the branch. Now I have a files in the Bitbucket and GitHub. So that's why the same way you can practice at the code commit. Got it? So go and commit it, guys. I'm requesting you all, please try to commit the code at the all repositories. So Bitbucket and GitHub and the code commit. Okay. So got it. So this is the way you have to understand the first step. So you must have repository. The repository must have our target code. So once the project is uploaded to the GitHub or Bitbucket or code commit, next, so these two steps we done it. So we already have local repositories. From the local repository, we are trying to connect into the GitHub as well as a Bitbucket or code commit. So our source code is ready. Then you have to configure this part. You have to configure this part and you have to explain this. So please, all of you, practice this one. Okay. Any doubts? చేయండి ఇది మీరు ప్రాక్టీస్ చేయండి అండ్ వన్స్ ఇట్ ఈస్ రెడీ దెన్ విల్ సీ ద నెక్స్ట్ ఫేజ్ కంటిన్యూ చేద్దాం. గాట్ ఇట్ బై. సో ఐమ్ లివింగ్ యాక్చువల్లీ వ్యాక్సినేషన్ బుక్ చేసుకున్నాను అది